This is the SpaceX Starship. It stands 120 meters tall, it's the most powerful rocket ever built, and it's the first spacecraft in human history with a genuine shot at turning us into a multiplanetary species. We're talking about sending not just a handful of astronauts, but entire crews of regular people from Earth to Mars and back again. But even for all its massive size and revolutionary capability, the Starship is far from a luxury space hotel. The journey will be long, uncomfortable, psychologically challenging, and honestly, kind of disgusting. The experience will push our interplanetary pioneers to their absolute limits. So if the Starship is really going to carry people 225 million kilometers to Mars, spend a year and a half on the surface, and then bring them all the way back, then what is that actually going to look like? What will life be like inside this tin can hurtling through the void of space? Let's find out. The initial vision for Starship was spectacular. The entire upper section of this 50-meter-tall spacecraft, the part that actually goes to Mars, would be wide open for both crew and cargo. We're talking about 1,100 cubic meters of sweeping, open-concept living space. Imagine floor-to-ceiling windows wrapping around the nose cone, giving you an unobstructed view of Earth shrinking behind you and Mars growing larger ahead. It was supposed to feel like a penthouse apartment in the sky. Spacious. Airy. Almost luxurious. Then reality showed up. SpaceX started test-flying Starship prototypes in 2020, and let's just say the landing part needed some work. There was SN8, which came screaming in too fast and exploded on impact. Then SN9 did basically the same thing. SN10 actually stuck the landing, but then exploded 8 minutes later. SN11 exploded mid-air in the fog. It was a long, expensive period of trial, error, massive fireballs, and debris raining down on the Texas coast. But SpaceX learned something critical during all those spectacular failures. One of the biggest changes they made was relocating the header tanks, the secondary fuel tanks used for the landing burn. Originally, these were at the bottom of the rocket. But if you watch that incredible belly flop maneuver the Starship performs as it comes in for landing, you'll see the entire bottom of the rocket swings around like a pendulum. And here's the thing, you absolutely do not want thousands of pounds of liquid fuel sloshing around down there during that maneuver. You want it up top, in the nose cone, where the ship remains relatively stable during the flip. The change worked brilliantly. Starship started landing consistently. But it does mean that the entire pointy bit, that beautiful nose cone with the panoramic windows? Yeah, that's now off limits for the crew. It's filled with fuel tanks. So, no more big window overlooking the cosmos. Then SpaceX started flying Starship all the way to orbital velocity and bringing it back through the hellfire of atmospheric re-entry. This led to another major revelation. If they wanted to get meaningful payload to orbit, the rocket needed more fuel. A lot more fuel. In 2024, SpaceX began developing Starship V2. Now this is counterintuitive, but stay with me. The new Starship is bigger on the outside, stretched by about 2 meters in diameter. But it's actually smaller on the inside. What they did was extend the fuel tanks upward, eating into what used to be cargo space. The propellant section now intrudes about 5 meters into the payload bay. This gives Starship the fuel capacity to carry itself plus 100 metric tons of cargo all the way to low Earth orbit without refueling. So if we were traveling to Mars inside the Starship V2 as it exists today, we'd have roughly 550 cubic meters of potentially livable space. That's half of the original dream, but let's put that in perspective. The International Space Station offers about 916 cubic meters of internal volume, but it's spread across a claustrophobic maze of narrow modules and passageways. The ISS permanently houses 7 people and has held up to 13 during crew handovers. So how many people could we reasonably fit into a Starship V2 for a round-trip Mars mission? Lucky for us, NASA already studied this question back in 2013. They determined that for a crewed mission to Mars with an estimated duration of 916 days, each person would need a minimum of 25 cubic meters. And that's not personal space, that's just their share of the general living area. About the same volume as a standard shipping container. According to that research, our Starship V2 could theoretically support up to 22 people without significant risk of psychological breakdown. But we also need to remember that crew space is not the same as cargo space. A starship designed for humans needs floors, walls, a central structural column, life support systems, and storage. Plus, the entire lower section has to function as an airlock and cargo bay because, hopefully, we're actually going to land on Mars and explore the surface. With all that considered, our 550 cubic meters is rapidly shrinking into something considerably less comfortable. You might squeeze in a crew of 8, maybe 10 if everyone's really friendly. But that's not exactly the fleet of colonists we need to establish a Martian settlement. And this is where Starship V3 comes in. The long Starship. Standing at an impressive 71 meters tall for the upper stage alone. Starship V3 adds about 21 meters in length compared to V2. Now, that extra length also means extra weight, which means we need bigger fuel tanks to lift all that mass. So we don't get all 21 meters back for habitable space. But what we do end up with is something much closer to that original Starship concept, approximately 1,000 cubic meters of internal volume. SpaceX got us there. It just required building a bigger rocket and accepting some compromises along the way. See, we can be realistic and optimistic at the same time. It is possible. Now that we finally know where we're living during our Mars Odyssey, let's start building out the interior. We'll work our way up from bottom to top, deck by deck, and I promise you, some of this is going to be uncomfortable to talk about. Starting from the bottom. We know the lower level needs to be an airlock and cargo bay. And we actually have a pretty good reference for what this looks like because SpaceX has already designed a modified Starship for NASA's Artemis moon landing program. The bottom deck features a large circular airlock that astronauts enter from above using a ladder. Inside that circular chamber is where the EVA suits are stored, along with helmet systems, gloves, and life support backpacks. Once you're suited up, you pass through an inner hatch into the unpressurized cargo hold. This is where all the exploration equipment lives. Rovers, scientific instruments, sample collection tools, cameras, communications equipment, emergency supplies. It's basically a high-tech garage. And then there's the elevator. Because it's going to be a very long way down to the Martian surface. We've seen glimpses of what SpaceX has in mind, a cargo lift platform that's somewhere between an industrial service elevator and a shark cage. Nothing fancy. Just a metal platform with railings that slowly lowers you 30 meters down to the ground. Which is perfect, because the last thing you want is for this critical piece of equipment to break. Simple is reliable. That's level 1. Moving up to deck 2, and this is where things get practical and unsexy. This level makes the most sense as our primary storage deck, and here's why. This ship needs to land on Mars, which means we want to keep the center of gravity as low as possible. Heavy stuff goes on the bottom. So level 2 is home to our water storage tanks, our oxygen generation and storage systems, our HVAC and air circulation equipment, our food supplies for 900 days, our spare parts and tools, and our waste storage containers. Yes, waste storage. We'll get to that. This deck is essentially the life support foundation of the ship. It's not glamorous. You won't be hanging out here. But it's what keeps everyone alive. Alright, moving up to deck 3. And this is where we need to talk about something important, hygiene in space. It makes the most sense to keep the washing facilities and toilets as close to the storage deck as possible. That minimizes the plumbing runs and keeps all the water systems consolidated. Smart engineering. But this is not going to be luxurious. Do not, under any circumstances, expect a hot shower on your trip to Mars. At best, you'll clean yourself using a damp cloth and no-rinse body wash. You'll shampoo your hair with a dry powder that you massage in and then towel out. Some astronauts just shave their heads before launch because it's easier. And here's where things get really uncomfortable. Let's talk about water management. Without recycling, we would need to bring approximately 27 metric tons of water for just 10 people on a 900-day mission. That's somewhere between 1/4 and 1/8 of Starship's total cargo capacity just for water. It's completely impractical. But if we recycle, we can reduce that to about 3 metric tons of initial water supply. Now, here's what recycling actually means. The current standard on the ISS is 93% water recovery. That means urine gets filtered, purified, and recombined into the drinking water supply. Every drop you drink, you'll eventually pee out, and then you'll drink it again. And again. For 2.5 years. But wait, it gets worse. Solid waste is also processed. It gets dehydrated in a special toilet system. The solid matter gets compressed and stored in sealed containers down on level 2. The moisture that's extracted from it, that also gets recombined back into the water supply. So yeah. Astronauts drink their recycled urine and the extracted moisture from their own feces. This is what we signed up for. This is the reality of deep space travel. According to people who have seen the interior mock-ups of the Starship lunar lander, SpaceX is developing these compact rectangular hygiene modules. Each module combines a toilet and a minimal washing station, positioned at angles around the circular perimeter of the ship to maximize usable space. And while we're keeping all the unpleasant odors contained on one deck, we might as well put the gym here too. Because yes, everyone needs to exercise. 2 hours per day, minimum, split between cardiovascular work and resistance training. Without it, you'll lose bone density and muscle mass at an alarming rate. So we'll have stationary bikes, treadmills with restraint harnesses for zero gravity, and specialized resistance machines that work in any gravitational environment. Level 3, the deck where you get clean, stay fit, and try not to think too hard about what you're drinking. Moving up to deck 4, and we're finally getting to the sleeping quarters. Let's do some math. If we started with 1,000 cubic meters of empty space in Starship V3, then we install walls, floors, insulation, and structural supports, then we fill up 2 entire decks with airlock, storage, and life support systems, we're probably left with about 600 cubic meters of actual crew living space. Now, 600 cubic meters is hard to visualize, so let me put it in relatable terms. The crew compartment of Starship V3 would be equivalent to a decent-sized house with 4 bedrooms and about 2,300 square feet of floor space. That sounds pretty comfortable, right? A nice house. But remember our NASA equation, you can fit 24 people in that much space without anyone going clinically insane. And that tracks with what we know about SpaceX's internal designs. According to sources who have seen the Artemis mock-ups, SpaceX has developed rectangular sleeping pods, similar to the hygiene modules. These pods stack efficiently and can fit 20 beds on a single Starship deck. So that's probably our realistic crew size, 20 people. Now, it's worth mentioning that Elon Musk has confidently stated that Starship can carry 100 people to Mars in one trip. And while that's technically possible if you really pack people in like sardines, let me paint you a picture of what that would actually look like. Imagine 100 people crammed into this space for 8 months straight. Sleeping in shifts because there aren't enough beds. Standing room only in common areas. The smell alone would be unbearable. You'd be stepping over people constantly. Privacy would be a distant memory. I'm pretty sure that falls under the category of cruel and unusual punishment. So let's stick with 20 crew members. That's already going to be challenging enough. Moving up to deck 5, and we can start getting into some actual comfort features. The mess hall, or kitchen area, or whatever you want to call the place where we pretend to cook. Now, cooking in space basically consists of pumping hot water into vacuum-sealed pouches of freeze-dried food. You wait about 5 minutes for it to rehydrate, then you squeeze the contents into your mouth. It's not all terrible, though. Astronauts on the ISS still get pizza. It comes as a dehydrated flatbread with powdered cheese and sauce that you rehydrate separately. By all accounts, it's edible. But here's something genuinely exciting. It's more than likely that SpaceX would incorporate some kind of hydroponic greenhouse system into the mess hall. NASA has already been running experiments with growing plants in zero-gravity and low-gravity environments, and the results are promising. I wouldn't expect vine-ripened tomatoes or fresh strawberries. But we might be able to grow lettuce, some herbs, maybe even small peppers. The psychological benefit of having something fresh and green, something living that you can tend to, something that's not freeze-dried, that could be huge for crew morale. Plus, plants help with air quality and give people something productive to do. Level 6 is where we can finally open things up a little bit. We've got 9 meters of width to work with in this rocket, minus some space for walls and insulation. So let's use it. This deck needs to provide relief from the claustrophobia and confined spaces of the lower decks. We need a proper lounge area, a social space where the crew can decompress. Install some large windows or high-resolution screens showing the view outside. Maybe even hang some artwork on the walls, bring some color into this metal tube. The challenge is that during the transit in zero gravity, everyone can just float around. But once we land on Mars and gravity returns to the equation, we need actual furniture. Couches and chairs for 20 people. Communal tables. Maybe some modular seating that can be reconfigured. Personal entertainment is going to be critical. You're not going to get 20 people to agree on what to watch on a shared screen. So personal entertainment systems become essential. VR headsets, tablets with downloaded movies and books, music libraries, video games. Virtual reality might actually be one of the most valuable tools for mental health on the journey. You can escape the confines of the ship for a few hours, walk through a forest, sit on a beach, visit places that feel open and free. Moving up to deck 7, and let's call this the office or workspace. We're going to be away from Earth for nearly 3 years. That's a long time. You can't just stare at the walls or watch movies for 3 years straight. People need purpose. They need to feel productive. They need to stay mentally engaged. There's an old saying, an idle brain is the devil's workshop. Boredom and isolation are dangerous combinations. People start fixating on small problems, conflicts get blown out of proportion, depression can set in. So this deck is set up as a work and study area. Research stations, computer workstations, areas for mission planning and training. Some crew members will be monitoring ship systems. Others will be conducting scientific experiments. Some might be learning new skills or working remotely on projects back on Earth when communication latency allows. And look, I don't know what the official protocol is for someone who completely loses it mentally during the mission, but I'd assume we might have to jettison you into space. So best to stay occupied. I'm kidding. Mostly. And finally, at the very top of our habitable zone, we have level 8, the flight deck, the bridge, the command center. This is where the actual business of flying a spaceship happens. Navigation systems, communication arrays, flight controls, system monitoring stations. This is mission control for the ship. It's also where we strap in for launch and landing, and there's a specific reason for that. Remember how we talked about SpaceX moving the landing fuel up into the nose cone so it wouldn't slosh around during the dramatic belly flop maneuver? Well, we also don't want the crew getting sloshed around during that same flip. When the bottom of the ship swings around like a pendulum during the landing sequence, you want to be as high up and close to the center of rotation as possible. The forces are much gentler up here. So the flight deck has acceleration couches for the entire crew, oriented to handle the g-forces of both launch and landing. And assuming we've survived the launch, the 8-month journey through space, the terrifying descent through Mars's thin atmosphere, and that final dramatic flip-and-burn landing sequence, we are now residents of Mars. Welcome to your new home. Population, 20. The Starship will probably continue to serve as our home base for the duration of our stay on the surface. It's got power, life support, protection from radiation, all the essentials. We'll live here while we start the next phase of the mission, exploration, research, and construction. Because according to the mission plan, we're not just visiting. We're here to start building infrastructure. Underground habitats, power generation facilities, resource extraction systems. We're here to prove that humans can not only survive on Mars, but actually establish a permanent presence. It's going to be hard work. Dangerous work. The kind of work that makes the uncomfortable journey here seem easy by comparison. And in about 18 months, when Earth and Mars align favorably again, we'll load back into this same Starship, fire up those Raptor engines one more time, and make the 8-month journey home. If everything goes according to plan, you'll have been gone from Earth for roughly 900 days. You'll have drunk your recycled urine about 2,000 times. You'll know your 19 crewmates better than you know your own family. You'll have seen things that fewer than 1,000 humans in all of history will ever see. And you'll have helped take the first real steps toward making humanity a multiplanetary species. That's what life inside the SpaceX Starship will be like. Uncomfortable, challenging, gross at times, but ultimately, historic. The future of human space exploration doesn't look like Star Trek. It looks like 20 people crammed into a metal tube, drinking recycled pee, and still managing to do something incredible. And honestly, I think that's even more impressive.